Yo guys, what's going on? It's BigTmac here, and with the Formula 1 season just days away, I thought there's no better time than now to share my predictions for the constructors and drivers standings this season. Let's get straight into it. Before we begin, I just want to say that this season I'll be uploading a lot more real life F1 content onto my YouTube channel, beginning with race reactions, and it could be even more down the line. Now, let's get into our standings, beginning with the constructors. Well, last but certainly least, in 10th place, it's going to have to be Kick. There's literally no reason why you don't put them 10th here. I'm just sorry that I think everyone has the same opinion as me. I just don't see anything happening out of them. They're going to come last. I think it's very obvious. They've got a new team principal in Mattia Binotto, but I don't think he'll do very well this year, and maybe, I don't even think he'll do well next year, to be honest. But yeah, we'll have to see about next year, but this year I think it's quite obvious it's Kick Sauber in 10th. In P9, I have Aston Martin. I think this is going to come as a surprise to some people that I put Aston Martin this low, but I just don't have a lot of hope for them. They always start the season out quite well and then always just fade away into nothingness, and I think this season they're going to start okay at best and just not be able to develop their car very well and end up being clearly the 9th or even worst team in the sport come Abu Dhabi. Of course, Adrian Newey is on the car starting in March, but I don't think he's going to have a go at this year's car. I think he's going to be full focus on next year's car, and maybe Aston Martin in 2026 with the new regs will be very, very good. But this year, it's going to be 9th for them. In 8th place, I could have put these guys in 9th instead of Aston Martin. It's Racing Bulls. Now, I just simply think that their development will be just a little bit better than Aston Martin's through the season. Typically, the Racing Bulls team or the Toro Rosso team or the Alfa, whatever the hell you want to call them, typically don't have the best development either. But I think they'll just be slightly better, and they'll capitalize a little bit more on those weekends where points are available to the lower teams. I just think Racing Bulls will just pip ahead of Aston Martin and grab 8th place this season. Moving on to 7th place, a little bit controversial given how good they were at testing. It's going to be Williams Racing. Now, don't get me wrong, they did look very good at testing, and they did definitely look like they would be the best of the midfield this year with the best driver lineup outside of the top 4 teams. But to be honest, you got to remember last year, between Albon, Sargent and Colapinto, those guys crashed the car a lot of times. That's a lot of money that was reduced from their cost cap that year that could have been used to developing this year's car. Now, I think one of two things will happen to Williams this season. Both will end them in P7 in the championship. I think in the testing, they did look very good, but I don't think Haas brought nearly their best product. I don't think they were testing quality pace or one lap pace. They're definitely looking at the longevity of their car. And for Alpine, I just don't think they brought the best car either. I don't think they were doing the lowest of lowest fuel runs as well. I think Williams might have been doing the low fuel runs, going for glory runs to make themselves seem a little bit better. One of two things will happen this season. Williams will turn up to Albert Park, the 7th best car, because the rest of the midfield and the rest of the grid are producing the best they have, and there's no need for glory runs in testing. Or Williams truly do have the 5th best car and will start the season 5th best, but they've used a lot of money on developing this car as early as possible and will start to fade away slowly while Alpine and Haas bring more and more important upgrades. They'll end up lifting them above Williams in 7th. There is a chance that James Vowles has completely cooked and not used a lot of money and just propelled that car forward as truly the 5th best car. But I think that's quite unlikely compared to the two scenarios I just mentioned. So I'm quite happy with putting them 7th. And I think the drivers and James Vowles will be happy with that as well, looking into 2026. In 6th place, it's very, very tight between the top of the midfield. I have Alpine. Now, this is very simple. I think they will have as good or if not better of a car than Haas. But it's just their driver lineup. I think that second seat, it's just too hard to pick. Will Doohan do well? Will we do bad? Will Colapinto come in and do well? Or will he just do as bad as Doohan does? I think Gasly is set in stone, going to be the best or one of the best of the rest this season. But I just don't know about that second driver spot. I think that the Doohan getting out, I think it's going to play him in blind a little bit too much, affect his performance. Colapinto, I don't know if he'll do well. So I've put them 6th just because they won't have two consistently good scoring drivers. And 5th, obviously, best of the rest I have this season. It's Haas F1 team. Now, I really like their driver lineup in Ocon, obviously my favorite driver, and Behrman, who looked really, really good last season. Their team principal was really, really good as well. Look, their testing wasn't amazing. I think it was obvious they didn't have any glory runs in testing this season. And I think they'll bring their best package to Australia, and I think they'll really hit the ground running this season. Start with some good point performances. I think they'll try and edge Alpine this whole season just in time to snag that 5th spot by Abu Dhabi. But I think they'll have a really good season between Ocon and Behrman. So Haas, I've got P5, best of the rest. Well, obviously it's the big 4 teams in the top 4 going into 2025, but who will I have in P4? Well, I think it's pretty obvious to me, it's Mercedes. Look, I just think it's a consistency issue with them. You've also got to look at Antonelli being very, very raw. And look, I think it's the right call that he is in Mercedes, but he's going to be very, very raw. He's 18 years old. He's going to have a little bit of time just to adapt and get into the rhythm of everything in Formula One. I think he'll come really good by the end of the season. And I think George Russell might even be the best or second best driver coming into this season. But I just think their car is very, very inconsistent. I just don't see them rocking up to every weekend and challenging for a podium every week. So yeah, it's as simple as that. I just don't think they'll have the consistent enough car to challenge a top 3. So Mercedes P4. In third place, I actually have Scuderia Ferrari. Now this might come as a little bit of a shock. Why are they not top 2? Why is Red Bull beating them? I think they'll have a pretty good car this season, but I just think that this season they have the weight of the Tifosi backing them to maybe get a Constructors and Drivers Championship. They have all of the LH44 clan backing them as well. I think the hopes have never been higher for Ferrari, at least since the beginning of the millennium, to win now. And I think that'll be a completely terrible thing for Ferrari. Last year they didn't have too much expectation. They almost won the whole Constructors Championship. This year I think they'll have all the expectation, and I think they'll have a decent enough car to potentially win the Constructors, but I think there'll be a lot of mistakes both on and off track this year for them, particularly pit stops and strategies. I think if something will go wrong almost every weekend. I think they'll become a bit of a laughingstock again this year. No hate to the drivers. I think the drivers, they might have the best pairing on the whole grid. I think they do have the best pairing on the whole grid. But yeah, I just think their season will be filled with unluckiness and just terrible decision making. It'll make them P3. Moving now into the top 2. In second place, I have Red Bull Racing. 2 words. Lawson and Verstappen must see TV. I personally think Liam Lawson will blow everyone's expectations out of the water. I know he has a lot of hate watchers this year. They'll be left unable to hate. I think he'll be really, really close to Max every weekend and be Red Bull's ideal second driver. And I think the driver they'll be looking for ever since Ricciardo left and Perez just kind of fell off the cliff after 2021. I think he'll be their perfect second driver that will be able to steal points from other teams and help Max propel his strategy forward against other competitors. I think Max will be at his best again this season. I think the car won't be amazing, but if he pulls off more drives like Brazil last year, I think he'll be very, very happy to snag the P2 ahead of the other top 4 teams. And obviously, last but not least, it's McLaren taking out the Constructors this year. I think it'll be a little bit of an underwhelming season this season. We've had all these high expectations of anyone could win out of the top 4 teams. But I think McLaren will actually just run away with it. They had a really, really, really good testing. While testing doesn't mean everything, the way that they were driving in testing, there's still time to find in that car, it looks like. And they were already doing pretty good times. Yeah, I just think McLaren will run away with it, especially at the beginning of the season before other teams will develop. And I don't think it'll be much of a debate as to what car is the best car this season. I think McLaren will have the clear best car. Whether it'll be close in the Constructors or not, I don't know. Maybe Max will pull off a miracle. Maybe Ferrari will be less unlucky or stupid than I thought they would be and bring it up. And maybe Mercedes will be less inconsistent than I think. But I still think McLaren will win the Constructors, and I think they'll win a majority of the races this season. Here is my 2025 Constructors standings predictions. Look, it's a little bit out there, especially with the Williams prediction, maybe a little bit too low, but I genuinely think that's where they'll finish. And also Ferrari, I just have a really bad feeling that this season is not going to go well for them. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below, and if you agree or disagree with me. Well, now it's the big one, the drivers' standings. Who do I have in first? Who do I have being the best of the midfield? We're about to find out. In P20, no hate against him. I think he's a very good driver. It's Gabby Bortoleto. Look, there's no hate against him. I think he's a good driver. I think between him and Hulkenberg, it'll be extremely close, judging on quality and pace race times this season. I just think that kick is going to be so excruciatingly bad that you just can't have both kick drivers last and second last. Bit of a spoiler to who I put next. But yeah, I think Gabriel Bortoleto in 20th and ultimately Nico Hulkenberg in 19th. I think it's quite inevitable unless Doohan doesn't get a point in those first few races and gets axed immediately, essentially. I just don't see a world where Gabriel Bortoleto and Nico Hulkenberg don't finish 19th and 20th. I think they're going to be very close this season, but it's just going to be one of those dud years. Maybe Audi can save them a little bit, maybe bring them closer to the top of that midfield. But I think it's going to be a very bad year. If you're, for some reason, a kick fan, there's probably like 2 of you out there. But for all the Bortoleto fans, I know there's heaps of them. They're going to have a rough year because Bortoleto is not bad. And Hulkenberg, we've seen in the past and even recently, he's also not bad. But I think that kick is just going to be terrible. I mentioned him earlier. I think 18th is going to be Doohan. I think even if he does get replaced or he doesn't, he's going to finish 18th. I think if Colapinto replaces him, it's going to be too hard to predict if Colapinto replaces him or when. So I'm not going to rank Colapinto. But I think even if Doohan does get axed 5, 6, 7, 8 races into the season, I think he'll have a couple of points by then, and it will be a couple of points too many for the 2 kicks to even come close to. So I've got Jack Doohan P18, and that's just playing it safe. Maybe he doesn't get axed, and if he doesn't get axed, I can definitely see him getting close to the top 10, maybe break the top 15 in the standings. but I think I'm going to play it safer and put Jack Do in P18. Well, in 17th, it's a laughing stock almost this year. It's Lance Stroll. I have absolutely no faith. Usually I have a clear head, clear mind going into a season, and for some reason I put a little bit of hope on Lance Stroll every year. Maybe this is the year he'll kick it into gear, just like we saw it for glimpses in 2020. But it just never happens, and I have less hope now than ever. I have no hope that Lance Stroll will do anything this year. I think that Aston Martin won't be too good. I think he just won't be good at all either. It's just going to be a bad year for him. I hope it's his last year in Formula 1, but it's daddy's cash. I don't think this will be his last year, but I think P17 is the only fair place to put Lance Stroll, unfortunately. Well, 16th, I've got Isaac Hadjar, another rookie not beating his teammate, but I don't think he'll have a bad year either. It'll be a very important year for him. I know there's the likes of Arvin Lindblad coming through the ranks that might steal his seat next year, or Yuki's seat, you never know. But yeah, I think he'll have a solid but not great rookie season. I think he'll be relatively close to Tsunoda, and I think he'll pick up a few points here and there, but ultimately it won't be enough to get anything more than 16th. I really can't see him getting into the top 15 this season. And talking about the top 15, it's going to be Fernando Alonso. Now, I know what you're thinking, how is Fernando Alonso and Lance Stroll that close? I think the points difference will be a little bit significant. But secondly, I think Fernando Alonso is going to just immediately start reserving himself for his one last push, which will be 2026. I think he'll look at this car, a couple races into the season, and just not bother anymore. I think he'll completely turn off and just switch off this year. And I think he'll still get some points here and there. Maybe some weekends he'll perform really well, but I think a lot of them he'll just be very lackluster, and he'll still beat Lance Stroll. So it won't even look like it's his fault. It'll just look like the car is terrible. But I think he's really just banking himself for one last push in 2026. So that's why I have him in 15th this year. In 14th, I have Yuki Tsunoda. Yeah, that RB, I still don't think will be very good. I think there'll be a clear difference from the Racing Bulls and the Aston Martins to the rest of the midfield. So Yuki Tsunoda will be in 14th, and there'll be quite a significant points gap from 14th to 13th this season, I predict. I think he'll beat Isaac Hadjar decently. I don't think he'll be wiping the floor with him, but I think it'll be a decent year for Yuki Tsunoda in a machinery that won't be too good. So I think 14th is fair for him. Well, moving on to the best of the rest this season, I think 13th is going to be Alexander Albon. I don't have anything against him. I just think he'll struggle quite a lot against Sainz this season. It's going to be his first proper teammate he's had, and Sainz has had that top team experience and actually done something with it, rather than Albon not really being amazing in that Red Bull. I think Sainz has that mentality, and I think he'll be pushing as hard as he can to get the best out of that Williams car. I think Albon will be the second driver this year. There'll be points opportunities, but it'll be stolen more so by Sainz than Alex Albon maybe getting into the points. I just think Sainz will score more points than this year, and I've got Alex Albon in 13th. In 12th place here, I have Ollie Behrman. Now, don't get me wrong, I think he's very, very good, and is another rookie to add to the list. And when it comes down to it, I actually think he might beat Ocon in the quali and race head-to-heads this season, but I just don't think that he'll have the point-scoring mind, or he'll capitalize on his opportunities as much as his teammate. I think that Haas will be super quick this year compared to the other teams in the midfield, but I think when it comes down to it, he might not be able to score as many points as everyone else in that midfield. So yeah, I think it'll be a good rookie season for him. I think he'll show a lot of potential, don't get me wrong. I think he'll be very, very good. He'll have some very solid drives, and he'll have a decent bit of pace. But I think 12th is where he's going to end up this season. Well, rounding out the bottom 10 this season, I've got Carlos Sainz, the other Williams. Again, I just don't think the Williams will be that amazing this year. I think they'll be up there with the best of the rest, but I think they'll clearly be a little bit behind Haas and Alpine. But I think Carlos Sainz, he's very, very consistent, and I think he'll just know how to score points when there's opportunities present themselves. I think he'll be better than the likes of Behrman and Albon when those point scoring opportunities arise, and he'll be the one to take more of that share of the points. And yeah, I think he'll have a very good year in that Williams, and I actually can't wait for 2026 to see how Sainz and Albon fare, when maybe that Williams will maybe even push into the top 4 teams. But that'll be for another year. I think Carlos Sainz will be very happy with an 11th place this season. Well, moving into the top 10, I may have missed a few people, but in P10, I have Pierre Gasly. I think he'll have a very good year for Alpine. Maybe not the best of the rest, but I think that Alpine will be pretty quick. I think he'll score a lot of points this season. I think he'll be a consistent point scorer, and there might even be a few races where he capitalizes big time, and maybe like a Zandvoort 2021 or 2022 where he even steals a podium out of absolutely nothing. So yeah, I've got Pierre Gasly in 10th. I think he'll have a very good season, and he'll be the carry of that Alpine team in the Constructors as well. Now, don't call me biased just because I'm an Ocon fan. I've got Ocon in P9. I think he'll have a very fantastic year for Haas. Even though I did say earlier he might lose that head-to-head with Ollie Behrman, I think both those Haas's will be very, very good. I think Ocon will be that guy, just like a Hungary 2021 or a Brazil 2024, where something will happen, whether it be wet, whether it be an almighty crash, or just a complete shenanigans fuck up from everyone in the top 4, and he'll be the one to capitalize on that. I think he's quite a consistent driver. I think at the end of last year, his pace was completely undermined by driving that second Alpine car that wasn't getting any upgrades. He was shunted out of that team. And I think he's also got a point to prove against that Alpine team. But I think he owes one to himself to show the Alpine that they kind of messed up by dropping him. And maybe him in that Alpine would have brought them to a P5 in the Constructors. So I think Ocon will have a very good season. P9. Well, I think this is where things get spicy here. Everyone has the same top 8, just in a completely different order. And we're going to start out the top 8 with Kimi Antonelli. As I said in the Constructors predictions, I think he's going to come into the sport a little bit raw. He's only 18. He's almost as young as Max was. Well, Max was a freak. And Kimi's meant to be a freak as well, but I think he'll have a little bit of adjusting to get used to. Come summer break, he'll be absolutely on it. I think George Russell's one of the best in the sport. I think he might be completely matching George after summer break. That'll be a really, really strong team heading into next year. But this year, I think he'll just lag a little bit behind in those point standings, especially at the start of the season. So I think it's a pretty fair observation to have Kimi P8. And P7, this might surprise a few people here. I've actually have Lewis Hamilton. Don't get me wrong, Lewis will definitely want to be much higher up on the grid this season, but he hasn't had a team switch in well over a decade. 2013, I think it was the last time he changed team. Completely new surroundings, completely new car. I think he might struggle just a little bit in those first 3 or 4 races. He'll get up to speed pretty quickly. I think having Charles Leclerc as a teammate as well, one of the best in the sport, definitely top 3 in my opinion on current form. It's going to be really hard for him to keep up with Leclerc, especially with his quali pace last year as well. I think he might struggle with qualifying again a little bit this season. And with Leclerc, one of the best qualifiers in the sport, maybe even a better qualifier than Max Verstappen, it's going to be really hard for him to get those points over his teammate. I think Ferrari will have a complete fuck up of a year as well. I think their car will be decent, but everything will go wrong for them other than their car. So I think Hamilton 7th. P6, I'm obviously missing someone pretty important. Why did I not have him P7? Basically the same reasons I said with Red Bull getting second in the Constructors. I think he'll be very close to Max and act as that anchor and that perfect second seat or second driver. I think he'll be able to hold people up when he wants to, steal points off others when he wants to, and have a few good weekends of his own, get a couple of really good and important podiums for himself to really shut up the haters. I think he's actually going to even jump Lewis Hamilton. I think that'll be a massive, massive success if Lawson actually does end up getting 6th over Lewis Hamilton. Red Bull and Lawson himself will be pretty happy with a P6 in his rookie season in the driver standings. P5, this again is a pretty big call to make. I think he'll be quite good compared to Hamilton, especially his quali pace. I think he'll just be leaps and bounds ahead of Hamilton in quali. But I think he'll actually take quite the brunt of the just unluckiness for Ferrari this year, whether it be engine blowups, whether it be strategy calls, whether it be maybe him just messing up and making a few mistakes himself. I think that he'll be a lot better than Hamilton almost every weekend, but the points gap will be a lot closer than it probably deserves to be. And I think Charles Leclerc will find himself very, very unfortunate and quite disappointing to be down in 5th in the standings. But I just have a bad feeling about this, man. I have a bad feeling about this Ferrari season. So much expectation. And we've seen it time and time again, when they have expectation, they absolutely crumble. I don't know, I just have a really bad feeling. So I have Charles Leclerc all the way down in 5th. In P4, I have Mr. Consistent. I have Mr. Saturday. I have the most luckiest driver on the grid. We saw it multiple times last year. That Spa win where he just made his own strategy and somehow he won, although he got disqualified. He got the Austria win when the 2 guys in front of him, they were miles ahead of him, crashed themselves. He had Baku, again the same thing, 2 competitors miles ahead of him, crashed by themselves. And he drove and got that podium. I think he'll be there at the right time, just like he has been all of his career. I think he'll be in the right place at the right time and capitalize and get a lot of points and maybe even a couple wins this season in that Mercedes team. So I think George Russell, P4. Well, we move on to the top 3. It gets exciting. In 3rd place, I have Oscar Piastri. Again, I think it'll be another year where he has to unfortunately play second fiddle to Lando Norris. I just think that he won't be just quite there yet. I think he's a little bit inconsistent still compared to Lando some weekends. Well, I think he'll narrow that gap down and be a lot less inconsistent this season. I still think he won't quite be there compared to Norris's pace week in, week out. And while I don't think he'll have to do anything like he did last year, giving up positions, I think the McLaren is going to be that good that he won't have to worry about the championship or giving up points for his own championship. I think he'll still be that McLaren second driver just like he was last year, and he'll finish 3rd. Again, 3rd is not too bad. 3rd is, I don't think he finished 3rd last season, right? I can't remember actually. But I think he'll have a pretty decent year. And I think he'll be very, very, very close to P2 in the standings. But I just think he'll be just that little bit off P1. Maybe 2026 is his year if McLaren are that good. But for now, Oscar Piastri, P3. Well, P2, I think the reason why Red Bull will finish second in the Constructors, Max Verstappen. I think that Max will be quite happy with P2 this year. And if we know Max, he'll have some very, very fantastic drives this year. He'll still win his fair share of races, even though I think that Red Bull will just be a little bit off the pace. To be honest, I have no idea how big the gap will be between him and Lando this season. But I think he'll make it pretty close. And I think that championship fight, or they'll make McLaren and Norris a little bit nervy. Maybe he can steal a few points here and there, just like he did in 2024 in races like Brazil, where Lando obviously struggled and Max drove one of the best drives I've ever seen him do. And that's saying something considering it's Max Verstappen. So Max Verstappen P2, and obviously that means there's only one driver left. I have 2025 Drivers' Champion, Lando Norris. Now, I just think it's this simple. McLaren will have the best car. Norris will be the better driver of the McLaren drivers, and he'll win the championship. I think he'll win quite a few races this year, potentially 8 or even more. To be honest, I don't know how big the championship gap will be at the end, but I think Norris will be sealing it up before the last, or say even second last race of the season. I think it'll be a good first championship for Norris, but it might be his only championship. If Max and Norris were in equal cars, I'd have Max Verstappen every day of the week, but I think the McLaren will just be too good for that mediocre, potentially Red Bull. So there you have it. It's my first video on my YouTube channel that isn't related to the F1 game. It's real life F1. I do watch alongs for every single Grand Prix this season. Check out my Twitch channel in the description where I'll be live streaming my race watch alongs. And maybe you can yell at me for having some terrible predictions, like Medida. Or maybe I'll have the most banging predictions known to man. And at the end of the season, I'll laugh at all of you because I'm the best. But yeah, leave a like on this video and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.